So I'm laggy.
Yeah.
The audio's good. The video's a little weird.
Yeah.
Well, I don't care about my video. Okay. I'm trying to get everything off here now. Quit. So Atticus, you don't know if you are the host?
I don't believe I am.
Got it. Well, it's better on my end. You all look great to me, and I can see myself. So let's just go. And if you can hear me, okay, I'll just be like frozen. But let's do this. Okay. So Atticus, please inform us, an alumnus of Writing and Fighting Now.
Yeah, my dog is drinking in the background. Sorry. I am now a former student of Professor Kidder's. I took Writing and Fighting this past spring. Just huge MMA fan, have been for like 4 years now, I think, and just love the sport. Have tried to get into boxing multiple times, but just never quite can. And then also I try to follow Muay Thai.
I love it. And just esteemed member of this panel, bringing up, are you Generation Z?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We need that input as well. All right. Everyone has been introduced, and whether you can see me or not, I hope so. I am introducing our guest today, Chica, Amanda Sanchez. I have to know where this the nickname came from. I know there's a story. But so Amanda Chica graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Texas at San Antonio in communication. She is a photographer and acting coach in Texas. But she launched with was it in September 2018? Launched 2018. Unknown MMA, which is a whole new type of media outlet. And how often do you get a new type of media outlet in terms of sports? Doing it from a separate entity, not that's something that's associated with like Viacom or another kind of major entity. And you did this, and you also are showing different elements of MMA. I love you do a series. It's the Unknown. Is that the show that you do, the mini videos of fighters before a fight and after, and you have portraits. My favorite ones, Amanda, are the ones of like the fighter, sitting down in the corner of the gym, and that really tells you, because they're only in the gym or in the octagon maybe an hour a year, and the gym is the rest of the time. So it's good to see that there are other moments in their lives. So Amanda, I gotta know, how did you get started in photography? How did you come into the MMA world? Can you give us some of your background?
So I was teaching acting classes, and I started doing headshots for my peers because I was an actress. So I started doing headshots for peers, and then at the time I've watched MMA for a while now. Whenever I went to my first UFC event, I was on the floor, and I remember thinking like, I need to be in this space. There was a moment when I turned to my boyfriend and I was like, no, this is what I need to do. Like, I just felt it and it felt right. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to become part of this, but I'm going to figure it out. And then so on the way back home, I was like brainstorming, like, I mean, I'm a photographer. I could take pictures of these fighters, show something that other people don't really always see, have like a unique take on it because I'm a woman and there are so few women in this field. So I kind of I'll put my mind to something and I'll just figure it out. So that's kind of what I did with this. I just decided like, well, if I have my own outlet and I'm writing and I have people writing for me, I can get these opportunities for myself and for other fans as well, other people who want to be in this space too.
That's great. So I have to ask, how did you get this group of people? How did you find them? That you had this common idea?
Right. Twitter. Honestly, I asked people, and it was kind of a filling out process because obviously everybody thinks they can write, and a lot of people are like would submit things, and I would have them, okay, write this article, write that article, but then they kind of ended up filtering themselves out, where you could tell the ones that were really serious. So the team I have right now is really serious. We're all pretty close. We talk a lot about the sport, even outside of just like what they're going to write and stuff. So all of my writers, I give them as much freedom as they want. One of my writers has his own podcast. We have different series. I don't know if you saw, we did like reimagining UFC fighters as high school cliques. So like the popular kids, the jocks, like stuff like that. And so I like the more fun side of it, like playing around with the personalities and who the fighters are and seeing it from a different perspective than just like, oh, breaking, this guy missed weight. I think it's interesting to explore more personalities as well.
Definitely. So first of all, I love that idea of reimagining high school cliques. I already know where I put Kobe Covington. He was the kid who was getting picked on, I think. And I love that idea. Now, and you found the friends to do this with other common writers and photographers on Twitter. How about like entering the media world, where we've had kind of panels on women kind of breaking into the boys network. You're breaking into groups that already have their place there, a seat at the table. They already have their press passes. How did you do this?
I don't know. It's just getting the opportunity and not being afraid to ask for it. I don't know if you saw, I was with Leon Edwards for his UFC San Antonio fight. I was there that weekend. I reached out to him and I reached out to his manager, and by luck, they checked my email and they told me yes. And so I spent that whole week with them. It's kind of just, I've never been afraid to be rejected. So I just ask, and if they say no, it's okay. I'll figure it out. And I've gotten a lot of opportunities in the last year, and it's been crazy. But I think the site kind of shows that we're not we're not a same type of news outlet. We will cover like topical things, like the main event breakdowns and stuff like that, but we also look at it from a different angle. And having the photography as a main base for the website, I think shows a lot on like the professionalism and all the way that we actually take the sport. I got credentialed through, I guess, UFC first, because I was with Leon Edwards, but then I got credentialed on my own through Bellator. So that's opened some doors for me to be able to show my portfolio and everything to like Combate Americas and Golden Boy Promotions. So it's just every little step that I take is getting me closer to where we need to be.
No, I love that. I love that you're also doing boxing and other combat sports and other promotions. I think I saw you interview Tito Ortiz before his fight. Yeah. So, this is something that a common theme we found from other people in the media, like Errol Houani said he would just email in college fighters. And I think it's like, you don't get if you don't try. Right. And I think this is great advice that, I'm sure you get a couple no's or get no answers, but it's worth it to get those yeses. So the Leon Edwards, amazing. Is that one of your like most memorable photography experiences, or do you have another that resonates?
That was really big because it was in my hometown, and I was with them the whole fight week, like through media day and everything, and then backstage during the fight in the locker room and stuff. So that was kind of a shock to my system, like, wow, I barely started this, I'm already here. And I being in San Antonio, I took them on like him and his camp on like a tour of San Antonio after media day.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was fun. Another one I'd say is Mark Henry's gym out in New Jersey. I didn't really expect that to happen. I flew out to New Jersey to shoot with Ariane Lipsky, and I was like, well, there's a bunch of gyms out there. I'll just start messaging people. So I started emailing like Sarah Longo, them, like I was emailing a bunch of people in the area. Mark Henry got back to me and he told me I could go. He's like, it's going to be a light practice day, but you can come take pictures. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I mean, I'm going to be able to meet him and I'll be able to take pictures of their gym where they train. It probably won't have any big fighters. And then I got there and Eddie Alvarez, Frankie Edgar, Claudia Gadelia, all these fighters were there. And I did not expect it. And he was like, it's a light day. And no, they were in the octagon sparring. I'm like, this is not a light day, but okay. So that was really memorable just because I didn't expect much. And that's a big thing too, is not expecting too much out of it. I saw Caitlin Chukagian go into the gym. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get pictures of Chukagian like at this point. And then Eddie Alvarez showed up and then Frankie Edgar. And I'm like, what is happening right now? So that was really memorable because I didn't expect that much. And then I got way more than I anticipated.
Got it. And you're making these connections, building these relationships. So I have to ask, I've always wondered this about photographers, and everyone please jump in and expand the conversation here. Have you ever had a fighter say like, I don't want you to take my picture. Oh, I hate the picture you took. Will you Photoshop because I have a pimple? I'm just are people, or they know that that's, part of the job. And yeah, I'm so curious.
Yeah, no, not yet. I haven't had anything like that. I think I've had to move a watermark around once or twice. And the only time like someone said they didn't really want their picture up was Safe from Fortis MMA. But I sent him all the pictures first and he's like, don't use any of the ones with me in it. I want it to be about my fighters. So it wasn't even like he didn't like the pictures. He just wanted the focus to be on his guys and not on him. And that showed a lot about him to me. So that experience was also crazy.
I've had yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I've photographing people. I had a really good experience in unforeseen ways, in the sense that I never had anybody tell me they didn't want their picture or whatever. They always actually want more. They want the pictures from you that you actually think are not even good pictures, that you don't feel like represents your best work, right, Amanda?
Right.
So but one thing I remember was this is probably 10 years ago or 8 years ago or something, but I was at the XFC, which was a sort of mid-range promotion, but a lot of stars now were in that promotion at the time. But I took some pictures of Heather Jo Clark at one of their events, and I got this great sort of shot of her coming out of the cage, and I was right there by the steps, and she was, there's something about the moment when they come out of the cage, right after the fight, and they've won. They're really entering some other space, right? And I got this photo with the lights and everything, and then I got it to her afterwards. And then when she came back through to fight for them again, like a year later or whatever it was, she saw me and she said, "Oh, I want to show you something." And she showed me her phone, and she was showing me the background of her phone was that photo, and that she used it as like an inspiration for this reminder of, like, sort of why she's doing what she's doing. So there's all kinds of weird ways, right, that your work can matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even realize how it resonates, right?
Right.
I'm sorry, my phone's going off. So I also want to talk, and Tunisha, I really want your perspective on this, because fandom is one of your specialties. You have this hashtag, you created a movement. It's hashtag FemMMA. Is that the correct? And it's to gather women fans to support each other. What inspired you to do that?
So a lot of it is, at the time I had this kind of like a series go kind of crazy in the MMA world. I was tweeting, I had said, send me your favorite fighters and I'll tell you what it says about you. And so basically people were sending me their favorite fighters and I was just roasting them. And so I got a bunch of followers from that, and I noticed, like, there's no girls in here. Like, there's a lot of guys, there's no girls. I know girls watch this sport. So I started that hashtag, and then girls started retweeting it and sharing their experience and stuff. And that brought me a lot of friends, that people that I consider friends now, to talk about the sport and actually see things in a different perspective as well. So I think it's important for us being the minority in this fandom to gather together and to be able to talk freely and not, because a lot of times with sports, it's like, oh, you like baseball? Like, name me the lineup of the 1990 whoever. So I think it's good to be able to talk to girls and not have to do that equalizing or like have to prove yourself that you know what you're talking about just because you're a girl. So I think that was a big motivation for me as well. And if you see my pictures with Ariane Lipsky, I wanted to show that girls can be, there is this dichotomy of women being tough and also being beautiful, being pretty and being girly if they want to be. And Ariane's, she didn't wear makeup and she had a bruise. It was right after her fight. She had a bruise on her eye and she's like, I don't want to wear makeup. And I'm like, okay. So I got her a dress and she's like all pretty, but then she has this big black eye. So it just kind of shows to me like the dichotomy of women, that we're multifaceted and we can be both things. So that's really important to me.
Yeah. No, and Tanisha, I'd love too, on your viewpoint, taking what you said, how do women, do they have different conversations than men? Are they talking more about maybe the storylines? I'm curious how a female fan, how they appreciate the sport maybe differently. And bye, Atticus. Is there something that we look for in sports that might be slightly different?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was going to bring that up too, that hashtag, because it's just one of those organic instances of creating kind of that movement, right? Where like-minded people can connect and feel appreciated, valued, recognized. I think that stuff's really important. And I mean, that's why people, or at least organizations and platforms themselves, will create like that check mark, right? That verified check mark. It means a lot to some people, right? There's just different forms of currency now. It's not necessarily just dollars and cents, but it's likes, it's retweets, it's recognition, it's engagement that has value to some people. And I think from a fandom perspective, there's obviously a lot of layers, right? There's different levels of affiliation. So even just feeling appreciated and recognized, like, wow, I am like a female fight fan and there are others, and being able to find each other through that hashtag is important. And from a perspective of like being able to talk, like, it's crazy because I can go to a bar and like watch a fight and then, get into the nuts and bolts of it and predict what the judge scorecard is, to my male friends. And then to a female friend that I invite to a fight, they're like, okay, where is she from? Or they may have a different touch point of what will bring them in. Like, what country is she from? What's her record? Where's she from? Like, there's other storyline type of things, and I think it's all okay. I think if we're talking about the storyline or if we're talking about, level changes, either way, we're talking about the sport and it's a good thing. And it's too far, I think we get competitive with each other in that regard. And we get these subgroups of like women, bashing on other women and within, from a fan community, because it's like, oh, well, you don't know the sport, you're just watching it because he's hot or something, right? Compared to somebody else that may know records and is much more integrated within the community. But I think it's all okay, right? And I was trying to write about this and think about it from even just a sport perspective of how when it's niche, when it's got a novelty to it, but then starts to get that mainstream attention, right? And with that mainstream attention becomes more eyes, and more eyes means like more spotlights, and more spotlights, you're getting more casuals, you're getting more, layman fans in there that are just talking about the fight, just to do it for the gram or something. And so passionate diehard fans will kind of feel lost or deluded because it's like, hey, no, we've been here. Like, this is not new to us, right? And so it could feel like a competition, like your space is being taken now by someone who's just here because it's trending, as opposed to being a fan. So it's hard because that's why I think UFC 249 was just kind of like that rejuvenating shot in the arm, where it was just refreshing because there were no fans like that. It felt like that violent speakeasy, and it just felt like, okay, this is what it's about. It's back to basics. It's not about, man or woman, or is this for you know, is this for the gram or whatever? It was just the sport, the spectacle, because you can hear it very much like the first season of Ultimate Fighter, I think, because
Yeah.
it's, you know, it was just so underground feeling, but contrasting that with top shelf talent that could headline anything, but on paper it lived up to it. But to take it back to the hashtag, I think it was remarkable, and it's important, and I think it's just one of those instances where fans organically create their space, and it follows Amanda, I think your gumption of just like, if you say no, that's fine, I'm still gonna ask. You know what I mean? Because it's like you don't have anything to lose, you know, so why not shoot your shot? And this is kind of the digital way of translating that.
Can I ask something, Tunisha, based on what you're going on from a media perspective? Do you think, and this is kind of a general question, but you got me thinking about some stuff when I was at Fightland, and some stuff I had to reconcile, or rather failed to reconcile, about the modern media landscape. Do you think it's possible in this day and age to build something because you're talking about things trending, and you're talking about things becoming popular for a moment, or new fans coming in. Is it possible to build something and to sustain something based entirely on content? Or do you need to, is the simple reality at this point that you need to, even if it's just occasionally, go viral, go trending, have a day or a week where your site or your product or whatever is just buzzing for whatever reason, whether it's a controversial reason or a hot take or whatever it is? I mean, is it possible to have a website that is just like, you know, Amanda's website? Could it sustain itself just with serious MMA fans? Or is that model just dead in the age of social media and immediacy and trending and viral stuff?
I hope it's not dead. I hope it's not. And I think there has to be some media publishers that exist that are okay with it, right? Like, I'm here just to be a service to my community, and because I love this shit, and because I think, you know, I know there's a community, right? As opposed to, I'm doing this to try and go viral every single time, to try and make it to Wendy Williams, or to make it on First Take on ESPN. Like, there has to be some, I think there's some brands and companies out there that are just willing to be who they are and make enough money to support themselves and their families, and that's okay, and that's enough, right? I think Roots of Fight is one of those brands, because I love that brand. It's my favorite fucking brand. And I found them actually when I went to Vegas, and they had some stuff in the Las Vegas Fight Shop. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is and I just opened the doors of their pro wrestling line, their NBA history line, the roots of MLB, the roots of boxing, the roots of Muay Thai. And I was like, this brand story is amazing. And I discovered them about, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, and it's remained the same. It's on that same level. They haven't done anything to try and get viral, or to go the next step, or to make a show or anything like that. They've remained true to, I think, who they are, which is just bringing awareness and telling the stories of the roots of sports, the roots of fighting, right? They haven't done anything glamorous to try and like add extra content, to try and, you know, get viral on social. You know, like, if there was going to be a brand that was going to live tweet during a fight, you would think it would be something called Roots of Fight. They don't, because they don't care. They're an apparel company, and they're just there to sell their product and tell their stories, and you know, and sell shirts. But they're not going the extra way. They're not going above and beyond to try and make, you know, a lot of content just to get seen. It's oversaturated as it is, so it's hard to even stand out, right? So, but some people do it because there's just that innate, like, okay, well, viral means like money, or that's already a screwy, you know, transaction to think that one will automatically equate the other. But I hope it's not dead, to answer your question. But I think most media publishing companies, for sure, like, that's their goal, because they think that's the only way to stick out. But if everybody's doing it, you're not sticking out. You're just behooving. You're just kind of going backwards, I think.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Amanda, can I get your take on this? Because I feel like you guys have a point of view, and
voice too. Yeah.
Is that something that you've been diligent about, that we are going to do have like our brand, which is kind of the unknown, like what's not known about MMA? And has it been hard to sometimes go into the middle of, well, actually people just like this, like Tunisha was saying, like people just want to know the stats, and is that a hard struggle?
It's not a hard struggle. I think there's a balance that we try and maintain, because we'll have our serious articles breaking down the fights and like everything that goes into it, but also the like high school clicks type articles as well. It's kind of a struggle for me, like when I'm shooting or when I'm filming, like what do people know? Because I think we know a lot about the sport. We see a lot. The fighters share a lot of their lives with us. Being able to find that unique perspective to bring light to something unknown. And whenever I ask a fighter in an interview, what's something unknown, they're like, I don't know. I don't have like skeletons in the closet, but it's hard for them to even recognize like what's something that people don't know about me without being able to think about it ahead of time. So it's a balance. I try to keep it where it's not all serious and just breakdowns and just like about why this fighter should be the GOAT and stuff like that. I try to take a different perspective on it where we can have fun with it as well. And like there was one article we had, two of my writers were kind of like arguing within the article about who was better than who. And so it was fun because it's the casual fan can read it and get most of the references, and the hardcore fan is getting a new take on this thing that we're talking about. So we're putting a different spin on it. So it's not just every other article. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, no, and it's hard. Well, I mean, Josh, you were at Fightland, which was doing something different than the media, but it's no longer here, and that was because they did not continue with their wonderful editor who had a vision of doing something different and doing the human stories and going back into history, bringing back what were women in this. I mean, can you tell us more about your struggle with this? We've never really gotten into it.
Yeah, this is a sensitive subject. It was a very sensitive subject for a long time. But yeah, I was at Fightland for about 14 months, and it was kind of a fight. Apologize for the pun, but it was a struggle the entire time, and sort of a classic struggle, right? It's a classic newspaper movie from the 1930s where you've got the editor and the publisher at each other's throats all the time. And I just wanted to make something and have people come in and help me make something that was just a different take on MMA. It didn't seem that shocking to me. It seemed like there were 1,001 stories out there related to fighting that weren't being told, and that there were plenty of other very, very good websites, the websites that I looked at all the time, that were doing fight breakdowns and were doing predictions and that sort of thing. And that was great. I looked at those sites and still look at those sites all the time. But I really wanted to sort of go deeper and to go into some weird directions. And I was really fortunate enough to find a ton of writers who wanted to go there with me. But the simple fact of the matter is, and this is why I was so interested to hear what Tunisha had to say about this, was just that it was a fight from word go, because for two reasons. One, I don't know if I was really the right person to ever bring in money, because I don't know how to make money doing that. I was never sure that something that fascinated me would fascinate other people. And a lot of times that did come down to a sort of aversion to daily, potentially viral content. And as a consequence, it was always a fight with my publisher, who obviously wanted to. It was more important for him to be making sure there was money coming in every single day than it was to be building a community of people that I knew we could rely on every day and every week. It just seemed to me better to have people that you can always count on to read the stuff that you're writing and that you're publishing, than to sort of hope that something that you put up on a whim grabs enough people by whatever alchemy and magic, something makes its way out of the gigantic echo chamber that is American culture and grabs people's attention. It just seemed like a losing proposition to try to run around chasing clicks. And it sort of came to a head right before I was fired. It came to a head with, there was an example of this where the video department went off and recorded quote unquote funny video where they had Robbie Lawler pretending to be Justin Bieber during Justin Bieber. I don't know if you guys remember, if Justin Bieber did a deposition for some crime he may have committed. I don't even remember anymore. But these guys who I was working with went off and recorded a funny version of Justin, where Robbie Lawler pretended to be Justin Bieber. And they were so excited and they put it up without telling me. And I was completely horrified and mortified. And the thing it went viral. It was on TMZ. It made the rounds. Our traffic leapt up. It's the biggest traffic day I think we'd ever had. And then the next day it was gone. The traffic was gone. And I remember thinking to myself, so we did this terrible thing that was not good content. We were mentioned on the worst website on the internet, outside of obviously racist websites. I mean, it wasn't Breitbart, but TMZ. And as a consequence, a bunch of people who didn't know about our website and didn't care about our website checked in for one day and then disappeared again. And the sacrifice to our reputation just didn't seem worth it. And I told my boss that, and 2 weeks later I was fired. So, that's sort of the story of it. After I got past my anger, which was a long time, but once I got past the anger and the sadness, I had to admit I probably wasn't the right person to make Vice money. I thought I was pretty good at bringing in interesting stories and giving a different angle on fighting. I was not going to make them money. So they probably were right, but that didn't make me any less heartbroken about it.
Well, where is Fightland now? I mean, I think they have Vice, they cover maybe MMA, but I think that what they were trying to do of putting it in the middle, the Robbie Lawler, Justin Bieber, oh my God, I mean, that not to say that doesn't deserve to be on the internet, it's somewhere. I'm sure that people need to see that content, but Fightland it's so not what you guys were about. You had Julie Kedzie, you had LA Jenny, you had the great writers coming in and doing pieces that were more thoughtful and, we're trying to say something in a different, lens. So, I think
I appreciate that. And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that the risk for me, and it seemed like a legitimate risk, is this was a year into the website, and I felt like we were starting to actually get an audience of people, like-minded people. And the problem is, if you put up, sort of manipulative clickbait garbage, those kinds of people might get upset and not be quite as ready to come back and check out your site. I know that myself, if I had been a reader of Fightland, I would have been pretty upset seeing that. So again, that's why I was asking Tunisha about that. I was just wondering if that model even exists anymore, where you slowly build up a community of people and they slowly over time, start bringing in money, as opposed to desperately grabbing at something that might bring in people for a day.
Yeah, I hope some places like that exist. I think Fansided has grown and has become organic and has a lot of respectable stuff going on in terms of like content and diversifying it, because I think that's what it's about too. I mean, because are we, corporate gamblers or storytellers? I'm a storyteller first. I think we all are, right? And so if we're trying to tell stories, then that should be the main priority. And it's, but there'll always be that corporate battle of having somebody in a suit just say like, well, what's the money like? And just creating new streams of revenue and stuff like that will come. Sure, I think, but with some type of integrity too, right? Like clickbait TMZ shit. Like I don't think any of us are in that, trying to find a quick money grab like that. It's like Robbie 7-Eleven. That's like, I hope that I think that there are opportunities like that still out there. I mean, that's kind of like why we're talking about this, because there is not enough reputable, solid, story-driven media publishers out there in the digital space or traditional space. You would think in the digital space there's more opportunities of that, but because there's no constraints. but because everybody's doing it, it's so hard to find and filter this kind of stuff out. But it's an investment of time, you know, because it took I've been on Twitter for 10 years and just found you guys.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think also, I think I think it can be a very good thing to have somebody in a suit that is totally divorced from all artistic pursuit, even perhaps morality, whatever. The business people handle the business, but in the absence of having a strategy and a plan with clear goals, where the people that are making the content, or whatever you want to call it, with the people that are sort of running a business model that's interrelational to a lot of other things that you kind of don't want to deal with as a creative. You know, I feel like what happens more than anything is that either people either get really mired in craftsmanship and therefore don't afford themselves perhaps some of the business opportunities they could have, or they end up scenarios like maybe Josh, like what you're in, where you're a craftsman in a manufacturing shop, and it feels like you know, like it's disconnected. Although in your situation, I can see that it's also like, I thought things were a certain way for a long time, and then they just weren't, you know. So I get that too. But all of that to me just highlights the importance of, I mean, and all of the things that I do every day, all the time, all I'm trying to do is derive from other people, like, what is your strategy? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And people are really deeply enmeshed in the tactical and the creative and the craftsmanship. And I get that. I'm one of those people too, but I've just learned over time to try to have my head also above all that and sort of looking at everything else. But I guess, Amanda, what I was wondering was, like, you know, you started a media property in a sense, right? And you've been running this for a while. You know, so everybody's forced to either make a decision, right? Like, how far do I want to scale this, or what is my end game, or what is my goal? And then in other cases, perhaps maybe with something that's more like a creative darling, or something you're keeping near and dear to you, you're like, you know what, it'll just be what it's going to be. And there's no fault in that either, right? Everything doesn't have to be like a business venture, you know, cold and hard business venture. But I guess I was just curious for you. I mean, I think that what I've done in my life, and I've seen a lot of other people do, is you start something because you just want to do it. And then there's a point where you have to reconcile with that as you start to climb ladders or have more contacts or whatever it is. We're all native slaves to this sort of progress motif, right? So, like, I'm curious, like, what do you want to do, or how do you know you've been successful with your site?
For me, it's becoming I want the website to be a respectful media outlet for people to go learn about the sport, and I want to have those connections with both the organizations and with the fighters and with the fans. So I think the content we're putting out is giving us what we need in terms of legitimacy, giving a different voice and stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm doing this because I love it, and that's what started all of this. So I think the way Josh was saying about having that core group of fans and like readers that are always going to read your stuff, that look forward to your posts, that like certain authors and like reading from those different takes and stuff, it's building that core base that will always be there for the content that we create, not going viral and not just fleeting attention. I want it to be a brand that resonates with fight fans over time. And so the website it's not a huge money maker or anything. It is what it is. I love it. I like reading the content that my writers put out. I like seeing people share it. I like all of that. And I think people are getting to the point where they can identify with the site and like the merch that I make, because I make a lot of different designs, and I like creating stuff like that, with the core base being MMA and being like our logo is like blood splatter. So it's being able to have that cool content and like merchandise, because I know the website itself isn't going to be, we're not going to be MMA anytime soon. That's not necessarily our goal, but being among one of those outlets that people rely on, and they're good to go and read and have fun on the site, to build that core base. So that's my main goal, is being able to identify with the site and have that brand recognition with the fans and with the fighters, because the fighters are starting to know as well, and they wear the sweatshirts, and it's really cool, because I mean, I think the logo's cool. I think it makes a great shirt. So seeing that is really fun for me.
Are there stories that there are types of stories you won't run, or have there been stories that people have come to you with that you're just like, no, this is not something we do. This is not the unknown MMA style.
Something that's been kind of hard for me to reconcile with is featuring Greg Hardy. And I know that's a big topic because we can't not talk about it because he's in the sport. But personally, he doesn't align with my values. So that's something that I've been trying to figure out how to approach. Because these fighters aren't just fighters, they're people, and they do things and they do bad things. So you can't choose to just completely ignore a fighter because of what he's done. So that's kind of hard for me. That's been something that's been a struggle for me as a woman, as a compassionate human being, to be able to promote someone like that, or I mean, into other instances as well. Alberto Del Rio just got arrested for sexual assault. Interview with him. So it's hard to reconcile my personal feelings with the content that we're running. I think that's my biggest issue. I don't think there's been anything that I've like outright rejected that was submitted by any of my writers, but yeah, that's something that I'm navigating through right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to handle.
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up when you were talking about Alberto Del Rio. Did you say that you guys had done an interview with him before? Is that?
Yeah, I interviewed him whenever Combate was in San Antonio. So I have an interview with him, and it's just kind of weird. I don't know. It's a strange feeling because obviously he was only arrested. He's just been accused. He's not charged with anything. Whereas in the case of like Greg Hardy, he was charged. It's different. It's just kind of figuring out how to approach those types of situations for me. It's something that I hadn't really considered.
Yeah.
Good point. And I want to get to also your thoughts on the UFC right now, what you thought of 249 and going ahead. But one point I want to get to is how you say you want your readers to identify with you. I think you've done this very well on kind of creating a community, because I looked at your Who We Are, and you had these wonderful, often self-deprecating bios, and I was just like, I want to hang out with these people. These are the people who sit and have on the couch, and and I really thought that was a great idea, because and the fact that you found these writers from this community, and so it really does feel more than just a media outlet. It does also find it's your people, like you're really. So I think that's a really interesting how we've kind of made these online communities. And has that been, because it looks like it's been from the origin, but has that been part of it, is making sure it feels like that?
Yeah, I think with the team that we have, it kind of naturally grew into that. So when I first started it was with Jason Marlowe, and he is still writing for me, which I think is really cool. He published the first article on the site, and it was talking about weight cutting and how it affects the body and stuff, because he has a wrestling background. So he's dealt with weight cutting rules and stuff like that. So that was the very first article on the site, and he's still writing for me at this point. And it's just kind of turned into that, where it does feel like people that you want to hang out with, people that I would sit down and watch the fights with all these guys, and I respect their opinions and I like their takes on things. So it kind of naturally grew into that. And I don't know if like I drew those kind of people towards me, or if that's just who kind of resonates with me. Because I mean, I'm not on Twitter breaking news. I'm making jokes most of the time. So it's more of the fun part of it, where we just kind of play around, and I let them have their creative freedom to where they bring their personalities in a lot. And I'm seeing their personalities come out more, that they start getting more comfortable with it. And I love that. I love being able to see the way that they're growing within themselves, to be able to actually show that on the website as well.
I think that's great. Voice in writing. I mean, we could have a whole class on that.
Mhm.
Because especially in sports, that's sometimes deemed, no, you need to just report the facts and, don't bring anything that would be an interesting perspective or different way of telling the story. And yeah, so I would want to talk about that, but I know like we have a tendency to go long. I mean, I don't know if you know this,
Oh, that's fine.
but speaking of telling the story, UFC 249. Do we want to have a little moment just to talk about the Gaethje Ferguson fight? Because I haven't talked
Yeah.
about that. Go for it, Josh.
I don't mean to jump in, but I want to jump in because I've been thinking about this. And I did a little research, and I love the fact that my life, when I get to say I did a little research, it means I went on SureDog and checked out fighters' rankings. But I want to pose a thought to all of you here. This is my version of a hot take. I noticed that Tony Ferguson had never fought, until he fought Justin Gaethje, had never fought anyone in the top 5 and currently in the top 5, and only one person in the top 10, Kevin Lee. So my question to you guys is, did we simply overestimate Tony Ferguson and give him too much credit when he had never really beaten anyone? No one in the top eight. He had never beaten anyone in the top 8 or even fought anyone in the top 8. Did we simply overestimate how good he was?
That's crazy. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Really?
He was always ranked number 1 and ready for a title shot, but he had never beaten Poirier, McGregor, Dan Hooker, Paul Felder, Charles Oliveira. All of these guys are in the top 10, and he had never fought any of them.
I have to ask this, like, was it the lore of this fight with Khabib, who we know is the, undefeated champion, has only lost like one round, in his number of fights? Is it because that was just building and building and building 5 fights that kind of assumed that he was this nemesis, that he was the only person who could combat him? So we instilled his skills and thought of him in a different way.
Yeah, well, we talked about this, Nancy, that when it became clear that Khabib wasn't going to be able to fight this fight and Justin was going to step in for him, and all over Twitter and everything, everyone was, putting up memes about crying and I can't believe this, and we lost him again. This is the only fight I ever want. And the whole time I was thinking, why is this the only fight in the world that matters? But I think you're right. This myth got built up between Khabib and Tony Ferguson, so we all convinced ourselves that was the only fight that made sense. Meanwhile, there are 10 other people who Tony had never fought who were probably just as deserving of a title shot. So I think you're right. I think we might have created something out of thin air here. I think we created a myth.
I don't know. I think I think you just have to account for more than just sort of the meritocracy of fighting and ranking, because if you think of Tony Ferguson is a wild man, right? He's this chaos. He represents chaos. And then Khabib represents order. And even sort of culturally, sort of this, there's just this polarity between them that is unlike, I think, any other. And that's why we held on to it. But I do believe also there is a way of sort of assigning false value to that in terms of just being in this attempted matchup over time for so long that never really manifested. But, when I saw Luke Thomas bring up yesterday, that Ferguson's not wrestled anybody basically ever. And it was all in response to this idea of, why didn't Ferguson try to wrestle in this last fight? And that was exactly the kind of stuff that was going on in my head. So I think that really what it comes down to is it's like, I consider Ferguson a bit of a wild card. At the same time, I don't think he's been forced to rely on the full breadth of his skills. He's got a wrestling background. He's not alien to that at all. So I think that it's a little bit more about the poetry of what we lost as opposed to sort of the meritocracy of what we lost.
Right.
Man, you have any, we haven't talked about Gaethje either and his evolution, but I'd love to get your opinion.
I think it is a big thing about the lead up to that fight that it was such a big deal to people. It's like we keep losing it, we kept losing it all these different times, and it's like we're putting our hope in that. But I mean, how even of a fight would it even be? Tony is a wild card, but I think Khabib can neutralize that. So it's more like you always want what you can't have. So I think that's our thing with fight fans. So we want that so bad because it is this myth like, oh, it's cursed. But Justin did amazing. He did so good. And that was such a crazy fight. I love the part where Justin was going to his corner and he's like laughing and he's just, you can tell he just loves it. Like, he's like, this dude will not go away. I'm throwing everything at him. He saw the power he was throwing in every single hit. And Tony's just like so tough and so strong. And it showed us a lot about Tony's resilience. But I think it is just, oh, we want Tony versus Khabib because it's this whole myth thing. Versus, I mean, Justin could give him a good fight too. So it's kind of hard to get away from Justin as well because he earned that spot. He beat Tony, and yeah, maybe Tony shouldn't have taken the fight, but he did, and so that's where we are now. He lost a shot again against him because we didn't wait. So, I mean, we have to kind of reconcile with the fighters' decisions, and we might not understand them because they're totally different than the way that we think about them.
I love what you all said about that fight, because even from the false value or inflated value perspective but I don't want to take anything away from Justin because he brought it. Like, he had nothing to lose and he brought it. And I don't know what Ferguson's head is made out of. Like, Brown, that was insane. And even I love that you brought up, Amanda, when he was in the corner, Justin, and he was smiling and laughing, but I don't know which round it was. It might have been 2 going into 3, but his coach, I don't know what his name was, but he looked at him and he was like, what happened the last time you got comfortable? What happened the last time you got relaxed? You got stopped twice. And then that laugh just kind of went away and he got back to business, and which was Ferguson's face. But it was, and I listened to that Luke Thomas show yesterday too, wondering why he wasn't trying to go to the ground or anything and just like throwing fake sand in his face. And I was just so confused and was like scared at one point too. So I thought it was appropriate for Herb to stop it like he did. But yeah, I just love that entire fight. And I think that we should see, or at least recognize, that there was a little bit of inflated value that we were attributing to Tony, especially per, the stats Josh just gave about like him never even fighting somebody within the top 8 or top 10 before. But I also don't want to take anything away from Gaethje because, him taking advantage of this opportunity in the situation, he had nothing to lose, and he short camp. Okay, well, that means Tony did too. I mean, for preparing for him. And I guess he also had like a couple different weight cuts. So there was a lot of questions I'm seeing like going on after the fact to try and justify what Tony's decisions making were, or lack thereof, to adjust a game plan. But overall, it was dope, and it's 100% hats off to Justin on that.
Yeah. Any other fights? Thank you. Because we could talk forever on that. Any other fights that you guys want to talk about? Ngannou. I mean,
Nico Price and Ngannou. Yeah.
Oh yes, well, he lost, Nico. Yes, that was my pick.
His eye was hanging out. Like, that was.
Oh my God! Yeah.
But no, Ngannou, yeah, for sure. I heard him on Luke Thomas earlier too, and he was saying he was pissed that, that this wasn't for an interim heavyweight title, and that there's this, pause right now with Stipe and DC and stuff, but he wants, an interim heavyweight title. And I think it's an interesting and valid kind of conversation to even have, or if they make an interim with him and Derek Lewis, because that's something that people have been like salivating about. And then the winner of that gets whoever comes out of the trilogy with Stipe and DC. I don't know. I'm always excited about it because I'm always one of those like, combat sports as good as its heavyweight division, so I'm always liking when there's talk about the heavyweights. But yeah, that was insane. The 20 seconds of windmilling and connecting.
Yeah. Amanda, what fight were you most biased about in this last event?
Um, let's see. I guess Nico. I really wanted Nico to get the win, but that was a great fight too, and that's another instance of these fighters just being a different breed. They're just totally different, and you see that Nico's smiling all crazy after he just got the stop, and it's kind of interesting because going back to Gaethje's corner, I think it's important for us to recognize that the corners are important for the fighters. And that's something that kind of going into during this pandemic is kind of what kind of teams do they have around them, and what do they have bringing that sense into the fighters' lives. Because I know you see the passion in these guys. I'm totally going way off topic, but you see the passion in these guys' fights, and you know that their main thing is, I just want to fight. I'm doing what I'm doing because I want to fight, and having those corners actually stepping in and telling them, no, snap out of it. It's not just for fun. This is what we're doing. And then having managers and having people around them telling them, like, the better decisions to make are important to me. So that totally went way off topic. But yeah, Nico Price, I was most excited for the co-main event though, because I was so ready to see Dominic Cruz back in the octagon. And I felt nervous, and I think just because how long he had been gone, because I like her new too, so it wasn't rooting for Dominic Cruz. I like both of them. That fight I was the most excited for, and I think it was really good. I don't think the stop was bad. I think that was a good fight too. The whole card was stacked.
Yeah, no, the Cruz thing, I don't think it's, I feel bad. This is 3 years since he last fought, and the stop. I mean, it's so hard to know, what that ref is going through when they can't see if he's getting up or not, and it was so close to the end of the second round, but I wish Cruz kind of calling him out and saying he smelled like, alcohol and cigarettes.
Yeah.
It gives me, I can't forget who was it who lost a fight, and it was called, and he said, I understand the ref that you sometimes you have to make these calls. And, I love it. Yes. It was against who?
That was Ben Askren.
Yes. Yes. So, I wish Cruz could just, not take that line. We all kind of want to say, I lost because, and that's not my fault. But, I don't know. It gives me like a really bad taste in my mouth when I see stuff like that. Yeah.
I love.
It didn't seem like a Cruz thing at all. Those character.
Out of left field.
Yeah.
I love Dominic Cruz, but I was very disappointed too, Nancy, because as a man who spent the majority of his adult life smelling like booze and cigarettes, I don't like the idea of being scapegoated. Like he should aim his fire somewhere else.
You were triggered. Nancy, I wanted to ask you and get everybody's take on it quickly, because I remember when we had this discussion with John Anik, that he was saying, he was like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to have to lower my voice now because the fighters can hear. And we realized that was a thing, right? Carla said she could hear DC. Greg Hardy said he could hear DC.
I think it was just DC. I love it. Someone tweeted out something about the best corner man for USC 249 was Daniel
Cormier. And there's something about real-time objectivity, right? Because it's you have your corner, but how true to how strict are they going to be about sticking to the game plan that they came in there with, right? As opposed to hearing somebody objective and getting that information in real time, why they're oh, let me hear DC coach, shut up, so they could try and switch what they're listening to in real time. It's crazy. I immediately thought of all of you guys, because I know God said that.
Because we knew that there wouldn't be this noise. Why are they wearing the headsets? I guess to hear each other, but they better not.
Producers.
Yeah, you can switch stuff to hear,
But because someone said, I think I was listening to DC saying it has this noise canceling because usually it's the fans that are there. And so perhaps, I think it's kind of fun. If we're going to do this way, maybe we have a little DC as the corner man. See,
But people thought that it was unfair, and I was like, "Is it?" Because I mean, the other
It's kind of
person did
like
it too.
it was a cheat code, but everybody was given the cheat code.
Exactly. So it's not an advantage.
But it does raise an issue because it has happened before that some of these fighters who become color commentators get criticized when one of their teammates fights, just for sort of painting the picture that their guy is doing better than he might be doing. How long, if they keep doing these silent, empty arenas, how long before someone accuses someone of coaching some color commentator of coaching one of his teammates? It's bound to happen, right? Dan Hardy or DC, they're going to get busted for it.
No, gosh, yeah, you're right. That's like embedding, painting the lines. What if we find out, and I'm not going to say a name here, but one of those guys got a big check from some bookie,
Mm-hmm.
They'll probably have to start, because who's doing the card tonight? Is it Bisbing?
I know, you guys, I can't wrap my brain around this. That's why I'm just looking at the card. I'm like, we have him tonight. So I know that Annick said he was doing it in DC. So I think Felder is going to be the other kind of color individual. It'll be interesting to see if they have DC a little farther away, but we'll see. I'd also like to talk about the contract that we all know about that the players had to the fighters had to sign, and the media actually signed who were there on site. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm married to one, but it's interesting. What I've heard about this agreement is that it's very different from their previous bout agreements, in that it looked like it was probably made by the Endeavor crew of people, because it cited a lot of California law. And it basically says that they aren't liable for anything. They aren't even liable to really give the drug testing or sanitize. That's kind of like a benefit that UFC will give, but they're not liable. You have to, if you should be staying away from people with COVID, and they are not responsible. Like, you have to stay away from people 4 weeks after, plus your grandparents. And it's just amazing what this thing covered. And it's one thing that fighters signed it. What do you guys think about the media? Like, Amanda, what did you think about this?
I'm not sure, because it's so difficult with like MMA, because we know Dana White will shut media members out if he wants to. They'll do what they want. They'll use their leverage. And I mean, they are the biggest organization, so they hold a lot of leverage over everybody. And then making them sign that, even if the main reason is just to be able to easily sue for defamation if you're lying, it's an intimidation tactic. And I think that's all it is. I did see people saying, I mean, you're not media if you sign that, because you're just being PR for the UFC. But then John Morgan came out and said, I can say critical things about the UFC. I just can't say false things, but that's inherent in reporting. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. I don't think, I mean, it's hard to remove bias in general, and it's hard because you want to keep your credentials if you're there and you're credentialed. So they kind of were coerced into signing it. So like, either you sign it or you leave. And a lot of these people had to cover it for their job. So it's a terrible position for the media members and the fighters to be put in.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a thing? Because I'm reading, Kevin Draper had a really good article in the New York Times today, where he really kind of took a look at, because the UFC sent this operationals manual to the state of Florida saying all these things that they were going to do, but they're not really doing them. And one of those things that for me, I just don't know how they're going to do this, is testing the fighters and the tournament and having the test results come in enough time. Because we all know that Jacare was tested Wednesday and did not get the results until like Friday afternoon after the face-off and weigh-in. Now, what this New York Times article said is that there was a judge who arrived late Friday. Now, we hope that he was tested whatever time he came in. They had the people there. They did the swab. we know that likely he did not have the results before the fight. So what we're seeing is that they have these plans, but they're not really doing everything that you're supposed to be doing. What do you guys think? I'm just scared. I just don't want our
Well,
sport. Okay, go ahead.
This is the lab test, right? Of what will be the larger culture is beginning to start to go through. And I think sadly, we should probably start getting comfortable with misinformation, hidden information, and increased agreements, weird liability, people trying to reduce their liabilities in a lot of different ways. And I just think that really what we're seeing, I mean, even with respect to the press room, I mean, if you look at the White House press corps, or you look at how the media is treated with respect to the UFC and who's allowed to be there and people acting out of fear, I don't want to challenge the status quo too much because I value too much my credentials and my access. We're just seeing, again, like a foretelling of what we're going to be seeing in the broader culture. So meanwhile, we're looking at, schools potentially being out in the fall, which I think, in my mind, there's just a lot of things that are, I'm not very smart, but I'm like, of course, like this is not, brain surgery to figure out this is schools going back in the fall seems crazy. If you look at the science. So, I mean, ultimately we're just still we're right in the middle of this weird little lab experiment, second fight of 3 test tube fights getting ready to happen.
Right.
And like I said, like when we talked about this beforehand, we will only get the information we will only get information about who tests positive when it is critical for that information to get out, depending on who is testing positive. So I would suspect that we're only getting a small part of the picture anyway, and they had to speak because it was a fighter that was not going to be on the card, right? So I think that we're actually still in the descent of sort of misinformation and bizarre circumstances. And yeah, people are going to say all kinds of crazy shit to the government and just what they're going to do is they're going to inundate them with paperwork such that it's kind of like, if I'm going to write a paper for you, Professor Kidder, my first draft is going to be like 100 pages so that you're just like, can we just have an office hour and just kind of go through this? And, like that's the strategy, right? Is to inundate people with, semi information on both directions of it. So I think that we're just getting started in all this and it's going to get a little bit weirder before it gets less weird.
The narrative framing that we know happens in newsrooms has just entered our sport. That's like what it is. And it's like what Amanda said between, okay, that's not media then or journalism, that's just PR, right? By filtering some people out. It's that type of misinformation that you're talking about, Brian. It's like withholding information is still misinformation because it's not painting the entire picture. That's what narrative framing is. Like, I'm going to paint, you're going to know what I want you to know type of thing. And it's like, I remember when Conor fought Floyd, like ESPN reporters, Michelle Beadle and some other female reporters got their credentials taken away because they were going to ask about, the domestic violence. And they didn't want that. They want people to buy pay-per-views. So they're going to withhold, they're going to kick out the people that we know are going to ask those questions. This is a COVID version of limiting those that actually want to do journalism, ask important questions. Regarding the health and safety protocols. And it's like, obviously this is all going to be spaghetti against the wall for them. It's try something right now. Hopefully they have somebody in the room that does believe in science and begin to pivot. And every event we'll see probably starts to implement new protocols into, making it healthier and safer. That's all we can do. It's just the speed with which it's happening so fast. That's where the troubling part is, because there is no tracing, there is no, consistent form of knowing how isolated are we? How isolated was, Jacare when it comes to social distancing within the hotel? Like, he was in the hotel with AEW wrestlers, and me and Snowden had a fun Twitter thing about it. Like, if pro wrestlers get sick because of this, like, now we're really gonna get pissed off, right? We're like, dude, no way you get Kenny Omega sick because of some UFC shit. Like, no. So but that's real stuff in terms of who you're interacting with. Because they were in the same hotel, as the AEW talent. So yeah, I think it's narrative framing at its best, and it's just now entered the sports world when before it wasn't as severe.
Yeah,
I think this was inevitable, and as you guys are saying, I think it was absolutely to be expected, and it's sort of an amplification of the way the UFC has always treated the media and treated honesty and truth and candor, and I mean, the very fact that they put on these events was suspect from the beginning. That it's not surprising to me at all that they would use the fact that it's dangerous for them to be putting, and morally questionable for them to be putting on these fights to begin with, as a way to silence criticism and a way to really silence any analysis at all from the media. It's not surprising at all. And when this brings up just sort of a bigger issue when it comes to the UFC, that there's going to have to come a point, if MMA journalists want to be considered journalists and not just PR people or fans with microphones, then they're going to have to come to some sort of understanding among themselves that the UFC doesn't act in good faith. And therefore, it's not their job anymore to coddle or cushion up to or try to get access from the UFC. The simple fact of the matter is, it seems like a relatively easy solution in some ways, in that we don't really need access. I understand it. Part of the fun of being an MMA journalist, because a lot of MMA journalists are people who are fans first. A lot of the fun is having a card with your name on it that gives you access to the event. I get to go to MMA fights. I get to sit in the first row. It's really exciting. I get it. I've done it. But the simple fact of the matter is, nothing goes on at an MMA event or at an MMA press conference that isn't just available and to anyone who's watching the event. I don't think anyone's seeing something in the first row unless they're going to be intrepid, unless they're going to go into back rooms, unless, like as Jonathan Snowden talked about the other day, unless they're going to talk to the person that no one else is talking to. A press conference is, one, completely worthless journalistically, but two, provides access to absolutely nobody because it provides access to everybody. So I think the best thing that the MMA media can do, I like the fact that the MMA Journalists Association, the union or whatever, put out a press release saying that they weren't going to support the waiver and they weren't advising their people to sign the waiver. I think that's great. But I think that the simple fact of the matter is, you can only get smacked around so many times before you have to just say, I'm not going to get smacked around anymore. And I think not getting smacked around means I'm not going to concern myself with the one thing that they have over me, that they might take that away from me. And simply saying, okay, if I can't go to the fights, I can watch the fights on TV. And then I can write my stories and I can call the fighters, and hopefully the fighters will provide me access. And you try to do journalism work. But this idea, this thing that I think we have to get past, is that if they're going to take your credentials away, and it's like, big deal. You're either a journalist or you're a fan who happens to record interviews with fighters. Like, you got to make your decision. And I think we know who the blurred lines, the very fact that ESPN is both a news organization and the broadcast partner of the UFC completely makes anyone who works for ESPN totally suspect from a journalistic standpoint. And there has to come a time people either have to decide, are you a fan or you're a journalist?
Yeah.
So
No,
true.
and I do want to say, though, I'm glad you brought up that point about, and Amanda, I have to say, I'm glad that you're there to ask them, what is unknown about you? Because that's something we need, that you can get from the access. But I'm so glad you brought up, Josh, the association, the MMA Journalists Association, because it has, I think, Ariel is the VP. I think Mark Raimondi is the president. And Mark Raimondi, these are ESPN reporters who are saying on the forefront, we are not going to sign this. So there may not be there. Because Mark Raimondi, he was one of the first who really had a great article from the front, kind of breaking the story about this. Because a lot of people were wondering, why didn't the people who signed the agreement, they should have been the ones to break the story, right? So that's why there's a little bit of, okay, you guys are, you guys had this story, but you're playing along as the, so it'll be interesting to see where this goes, right, Josh?
I just don't see what access they're getting. I mean, it's not like if you say to Dana, if you play by the rules and you do everything you're told, and then you get an interview with Dana White, it's not like you could sit down with Dana White and ask him questions about fighters unions. You can't ask him about fighter pay. You can't ask him about COVID. You know, you can ask him about, how awesome is Justin Gaethje? You can ask him, oh, who do you think is the #1 fighter in the heavyweight division? Like, that's the interview you're going to get. So I don't understand. Like, I don't even understand what the payoff is, except if you just want to say, hey, we got an interview with Dana White. But that, again, that's not journalism. That's just reputation and clickbait. So damn it, Nancy, you got me all riled up again.
I know, that's what I like to do. We might know tonight. We'll see who's covering it. See if there's different, aspect to that. The other thing I want to say is this narrative that Dana White, he has the president come in before. Was that the main card or maybe the prelims? Say, this is what I want. Thank you, UFC, for being there to bring us back to sports. We need to get back. The guy, Tunisha, I loved your eye roll there. The thing is that he's saying that other sports, leagues and all these other people are coming to him and watching. And I think that's completely different because they do not have, you brought this up, Josh, they don't have a union. These are contract people. So there isn't this ability, because we've seen it with the MLB and the NBA, they have to make an agreement, and I really don't think the MLB is going to do it because they're trying to say that we don't need to pay you as much because you're playing less games. And the thing is that their union saying, no, we're going to stand on this. So what do you guys think about that? About other leagues looking to the UFC?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I mean,
I wish. No, you go ahead. You go, Josh.
No, please. I just ranted for 10 minutes. Go ahead, please.
No, I wish the UFC fighters would look to other organizations rather than the other way around, because the players, the athletes with unions aren't playing sports right now. And they're being protected because of that. And a lot of fighters are, because of the way the UFC is set up with so many people on the roster, you see fighters trying to jump line and raise their hand and being that company man. And that's what the UFC wants. And these fighters are disposable to them, so they can get away with anything that they want. I think a big part is the lack of a union, and it's difficult for the fighters to have any kind of leverage because of the way that the UFC is set up. And I mean, the UFC isn't doing everything right. This is all trial and error, and we don't know how this is going to work. We barely know how efficient the testing is. We don't know a lot of things just in general. And then to say that other sports leagues like the NBA, the MLB need to look to the UFC to figure out how to resume. But I mean, Jacare tested positive. He did the face-off. We don't know how quickly he got the test back. They were the only ones that social distance. We don't know enough to even know what they know. So I don't see how everybody else can follow the UFC's lead when the UFC is barely trying to figure out just this way to make money. That's all it is. It's not for safety. It's for show. It's to say that we're doing all these testing, we're doing this and we're doing that, to say they're doing it so they can make their money and they can fulfill their obligations to ESPN.
Yeah, exactly. And Amanda, what you're saying is, I'm making a prediction because we've already seen the May 23rd card, which was supposed to be at the Apex in Las Vegas, been moved to May 30th. And that's because I think Vegas is still not sure that they're going to sanction. I bet after this event, on Saturday's event, we're going to go to that Fight Island, if it does exist, because they have to just sanction themselves, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't they just stay in Florida?
They could, but you're right. I think that they can't get any of the international fighters, and they're going to start to have a loss, because they're having these.
Oh yeah, they all have to be in the States. Yeah.
Anyone have any clue where this Fight Island is? I don't know how they kept it a secret.
I think it's probably easy to keep a secret when it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I think Fight Island could be really cool if they did like really cool things with it, like bring back Fear Factor and stuff with Joe Rogan.
I love it because one last question. I'm going to tell you that Atticus had to leave. he said, it's been so interesting. It's great to see how, you know, on the rise media and combat sports works. And you guys probably all see this. Brian had to roll, and then Tunisha had to go. But this has been so great, Amanda. I really appreciate, you know, you're coming. You know, we are, you know, fight nerds, but you're one of us now. And and you said something about going off topic. That's part of my pedagogy of this class, is that we go off topic, because that's where you get to the really interesting conversation.
Right.
All right. So we have fight tonight on Wednesday night. Does it ever happen? Is this unprecedented?
Yeah, seriously.
You know, I'm sure that they've had, well, we've had Contender Series on Tuesday. And I'm sure that like International Fight Week, we've had a Wednesday, but it's going to be weird. All right. Should we just go to the main card? Because I'll be honest, because I haven't had a time to deep look at this card since I haven't had my week to do it. I wanted to go over, we don't have the Carl Robertson, the Tory. Amanda, so he missed weight and then had issues with his weight cut.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Nancy. I'm gonna have to join the others and get out of here. But I look forward to hearing
well,
what your guys' predictions are.
I know. Do you Glover Teixeira versus Anthony Smith?
That's 6-5 and pick 'em. I have no idea.
I know.
I don't know.
I know.
have no idea.
I'll get it from Amanda, and then take care. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye,
It's good to
thank you,
meet you,
Josh.
Amanda.
Nice
Yeah.
to
Take
meet
care,
you.
guys. Yeah. Bye-bye.
And then there were two. Brian thing. So what do you think about that? Let's go with the main card.
It's so interesting because it's such a fight night card. Like it makes so much sense. We had that pay-per-view. It's a fight card. It feels like a fight card. I think it's good. I think the fight I'm most looking forward to is Alex Hernandez and Drew Dober. I think that one's going to be really fun. I like the lighter weight classes. I'm not super excited for the co-main event, the heavyweight. I think it's either like really crazy or really boring with the heavyweight.
I know. I'm worried about those.
And I like seeing grappling and stuff as well. So heavyweights are fine. But yeah, I think Alex and Drew match up really well. And I think I feel like that one has the potential to be fight of the night. That one's going to be really fun for me personally.
I love it. And then let's end on the female fight, the sole female fight with Sarah Morris and Ashara Eubanks.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think on that one? 125.
I think so. I'm not completely sure how I feel about this one.
I know.
Sajara is very inconsistent.
Yeah.
To say the least. I think, let's see this matchup. It's pretty even in reach and height and everything.
Is it 135 or 125?
It is. Hold on. A little breakdown doesn't have it.
Because I know that Eubanks has missed weight. She's the Ultimate Fighter.
Did she miss weight this time?
No, she missed it not here, but she's missed it in the past.
Oh, okay.
When she was 5. So I'm hoping that she moved up a weight class. But yeah,
this is 135.
130. That's what I thought. So I like her at that upper weight class. She's got skills, inconsistent. So we'll see this. I'm glad they have a female on the card. You know, I talked about this where like, why aren't we having more women, you know, in these COVID or fights? I like that one. And I think it's because they don't have the training partners, and, you know, perhaps they're allowed to be more cautious. But I do, if we're going to do this, I think women have to be on these cards. It can't just be all men who are out there, you know, taking this risk. I want to see the MMA that they are part of this sport. So
yeah, I think I mean, it's hard for the girls to find training partners as it is, and then adding this obstacle on top, it's doing a disservice to them.
I completely agree, because you look at like Angela Hill, she's training with her husband. Sarah Michelle Watterson training with her husband, like, you know, that 2 fights there that, you know, were critical. So I do think it makes us, maybe this is a learning lesson, is that women you know, you have a place at the gym, but the support may not be there if the gym isn't there. So
Right, because it's so much easier to come across male training partners.
yeah.
The card on Saturday has 2 girl fights.
Oh, it
So
does.
that's
Oh yeah,
something.
Nancy Hill versus Claudia.
Claudia.
Yeah. And then what's the other one?
The other one is Courtney Casey and Mara Borella.
Gosh. That's a hard one. So Courtney Casey's someone who her fighting style is not always, you know, the best one to watch.
Mhm.
But she's, you know, she's consistent.
Mhm.
The opposite of Eubanks. What do you think of that one?
I think it's good. It's a prelim fight, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, Gedalia Hill.
are they going up? Is Casey going up in weight class for this?
Maybe because she's at 125. She's usually 115. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, 115. I know, I have to look because I forget. I'm not good at remembering. Courtney Casey's 115. Let's see, but what fight is this at? It's a flyweight at 125, so she's moving up.
You know what? I'm surprised we didn't see more of that with the circumstances.
Without the weight cuts, right? And we actually haven't had that many weight cut misses either.
No. Well, you know, this is these are all learning lessons because I think the UFC has gone, but they may be making you sign your life away and your money away if you do anything wrong. I think they've gone above and beyond in terms of giving nutrition and your own sauna and making it so that the weight cut, you don't have to, you know, anything they can to help you out and not compromise.
There's have like training rooms at the hotel too. So
yeah. So what about Hill versus Gedalia? We'll end on that one.
I love Angela Hill because she's like the female cowboy. She's becoming that, just like anyone. I'm gonna go with Claudia on that one.
You're calling, Claudia, she's ranked 6th, where I think, you know, Angie hangs out at the, you know, 15th. So I'm so glad to see Angie get co-main. You know, she's got her Reeboks fighting kit, you know, I love it. I don't like Gedalia, you just think has more size.
Right.
But I feel like she doesn't fight that often. And so we're going to see the short notice queen versus Gedalia, who gets injured and has changed camps a lot of times. So I don't know. I would love the underdog. If I could bet, I would take the underdog on Hill.
Yeah. I think she has a good shot. I think it's going to be a good fight. I love seeing these girls fight. So yeah.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. This is fun.
Oh, great. Well, I hope to have you come back because we like to look at things and kind of do deep dives into like the cultural aspects and, you know, but I am so thrilled that you have Unknown Media and, you know, hashtag Femme MMA and, you know, let's keep each other in each other's loop, I guess.
Yeah. I love this. It kind of felt like a master's class, but with people who actually know MMA, because I was the only person that would talk about sports in my master's classes, and everyone just looked at me like they had no idea what I was talking about.
That is why at American University. But I think sports says so much about society. It says so much about gender, race, and it's part of us, and especially combat sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's what it says so much about being a human. So
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, this was so much fun.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.